to it, and the genetic mutations that would follow such a holocaust would be unbelievable. We know what thalidomide did to people. Well, that's what radiation does. People born without limbs, born with mental impairment, and all the rest of it. And the problem is, we avoided that nuclear showdown, but we still have nuclear arsenals in both the USSR, the United States. The United Kingdom has a token military arsenal, as does France. Israel supposedly has 200 nuclear weapons, but that could be just propaganda and to keep the Arabs in check. But the Soviet Union arsenal, which is about 10,000 ballistic missiles, and the United States has a similar, slightly more amount. I mean, they would wipe out the population on this planet many times over if they were to be used. So you can see that having nuclear weapons is a bit of a pointless exercise, because you may win a technicality, but the technicality doesn't really count when you're all dead. I mean, you know, it's a nonsense. So nuclear weapons are a dead-end street. They serve no purpose. There's talk that Iran, the United States recently said that Iran stopped nuclear weapon ambitions in 2003, very recently.
I think,
but
currently,
it really makes no difference. I mean,
20 years ago,
Israel has shown its concern that Iran may become nuclear armed. Well, what's the point? I mean, let's be realistic here. If Iran did become a nuclear power, let's say it had 50 to 100 nuclear weapons and relatively sophisticated guidance systems and means of propulsion, rockets. If they did launch an attack on any country for that matter, what do you think would happen to Iran? Do you think the United States would just say, oh, naughty boy, don't do that again? I mean, Iran's, you know, the Iran government's not totally stupid, they're not suicidal. I mean, they realise that the United States and the Soviet Union have a dominant nuclear arsenal on the planet by any measure. And even if France attacked the United Kingdom and the United Kingdom attacked France, they could theoretically wipe each other out. But that's the point of nuclear weapons. There is no point. They serve no purpose. I mean, the only way you could win with a nuclear weapon is, let's say, the United States launched a preemptive strike against the Soviet Union and by some miracle managed to knock out all the silos underground, and also the submarine launched nuclear missiles, Polaris. If they managed to knock everything out, then that would be a one event, and the Earth wouldn't necessarily suffer too much. But the Soviet Union would be wiped out, certainly militarily. So what would that prove? Let's say that the United States wiped out the Soviet Union in a military conflict and succeeded, and there was no retaliation from the Soviet Union. What would that do? It wouldn't really do anything. You'd have a lot less Soviet people, obviously. You'd have the same number of US people. The world would go on. Millions of people would have died in a matter of minutes, and some in agony over hours and days and weeks and months. But what would the point be? There is no point. That's why nuclear weapons are a pointless exercise. And to have them makes no sense whether you've got one or whether you've got 1,000. It's not going to win anything. You know, you may feel powerful. You may be able to make subtle or vague threats to other countries that if you don't abide by our doctrine, they do it very diplomatically, of course. We've always got the ultimate response if you don't abide by our dictates, subtle as they may be. But one day, one country, they're variously called rogue countries, might just take the risk. They may actually do a preemptive strike, but it wouldn't do them any good, because if the Soviet Union doesn't, the United States would wipe them out. So there's really no danger of a nuclear exchange on any level. It won't happen. It would be suicidal for any small country to even contemplate it, let alone do it. It wouldn't work. The structure is in place. The United States and the Soviet Union are the dominant nuclear powers. That is not in question. What is in question is, what if a small... I know what they're worried about. If you have a massive nuclear arsenal, it doesn't protect you from what? It doesn't protect you from somebody infiltrating a society, say New York, Manhattan, infiltrating that area with a small nuclear weapon and letting it off and wiping out 2 or 3 blocks of New York. That's what they're worried about. They're not worried about rogue nations sending nuclear weapons by missile, because A, they can be knocked out of the air before they even get anywhere, and secondly, if they did succeed, the country itself that propelled the rocket would be obliterated, if that was what the United States decided. So there's no nuclear weapons threat except in the context of a terrorism threat whereby a small nuclear device could be infiltrated into a society, any society, and detonated. That is probably the only major threat for all societies from a nuclear point of view. There won't be a nuclear exchange, there'll just be a nuclear pinpoint detonation which may occur in any society that is deemed to be not in accord with those that want to bring it down. So the days of nuclear exchanges by missile are pretty well prehistoric. If it did happen, then humanity would be extremely dumb and extreme to allow it to happen. And I don't think military commanders in the USSR or the United States would ever contemplate trying to attack each other with a nuclear exchange, because they both realise that it would be a pointless exercise. They could win on a technicality, but what does that do? A technicality doesn't mean anything to dead people. So, we will continue on. We won't have a nuclear holocaust, but there may be a terrorist use of a nuclear weapon or weapons sometime in the future, and that is the only current danger as far as nuclear weapons are concerned. That is, the miniaturisation of nuclear weapons is what concerns authorities, all authorities, especially the advanced industrial ones around the world, because there are religious connotations also attached to wanting to bring down materially successful societies. So we won't be wiped out. My judgment is that we won't be wiped out with a nuclear holocaust, but sections of industrial society may be wiped out by a terrorist type of attack. And so what that means is that humanity will soldier on without the threat of a nuclear holocaust, which is a good thing. And so in that context, it makes sense for the major industrial powers to reduce their military arsenals, their nuclear arsenals, by a massive amount. We have a war on our hands at any rate, and the war that we face is basically one of survival. It is nature, inverted commas, versus humanity.